don't buy any more of these lo-fi tape effects. You can build one from scratch in like less than 10 minutes, and it's still probably going to be better. What's up everyone, I'm BusyList and welcome to my channel, which is all about music production, sound design, Ableton Live and all things related. And in today's video we're going to be talking about how to build a tape effect from scratch inside Ableton Live. If you have Ableton Live Standard or Suite, you're already covered because we will be using a particular device called Shifter, which will be the main tool for shifting our pitch. So without further ado, let's jump into the Ableton and start building. Now, so let's grab a synth that will create our steady note that we can rely on. So let's grab a wavetable and let's just move that a little bit. Yeah, this will be cool. It's like open and it has some low frequencies and high frequencies. We can even hide it. We don't need to see it. Perfect. Now what we're going to do is we're going to drop a tuner just to see how our note changes basically. It's not super necessary, but it's actually very useful. Okay, so now let's press note C. Yeah, perfect, C note. So now we'll be creating our effect in 3 stages. First stage will be the wow effect, so kind of like you hear the mechanism slowing down in a moment, like you have old worn batteries. The second will be flutter, so let's see the tape is slightly stretched and it's running very unevenly. And the third one will be just coloring, so we add some saturation and EQing, so simple 3 devices, we'll combine them as one at the end. Okay, so let's grab our first effect, which is called Shifter. So let's go to the effects here, audio effects, Shifter, there it is, let's drop it here. So the shifter has a very important knob called fine tuning, and thanks to this knob we can just tune it delicately or not so delicately if you want, and we will be obviously using this little knob just to create the whole effect. So let's start from wow effect. We can of course use this LFO here, but it doesn't give us too many options. But let's find a modulator called shaper. It is actually here. So shaper basically works very similar to LFO, so we can map this shaper to any of the knobs and it will just basically moving it accordingly to the wave that we see on the screen. But the plus of the shaper is it has slightly more options and you can even draw your own line. So let's draw our first line, which will be basically a straight line. We can just snap it at the beginning and we can turn off the snap in a second because we want to put a note somewhere in the last section. So let's move it down and we're creating that little kink that will just basically work as slowing down the tape. But we don't want it to be so sharp, so we can press Option or Alt key and then just bend these lines slightly. And then we can add a little bit of the smoothness. So we'll smooth out the sound, this LFO shape that we are creating, and we can add a little bit of the jitter so it's going to be slightly uneven. I'm going to show you how does it work without the smoothness. It's going to be all over the place, but let's just add like a 6%, 6-7, that'll be fine. And let's smooth it out a little bit up to like 30, 40%, and let's slow it down. We'll just work with frequencies and yeah, it's kind of slowish, so let's go a little bit faster, smooth it out a little bit more, less jitter. Okay, so this will be a wow effect. You see the wave and let's listen to it now. Okay, now, so the effect is quite smooth. Let's move it a little bit further. Like a little U. And let's manage the depth of it. So basically this effect is actually done. So we can work with the rate and depth from 0 to 100%. Okay, perfect. So let's map these two. So let's group them two together. We create that effect called wow. So let's rename it wow effect. And then we only be using 2 macros for this. So we can map the rate to the top one and the depth to the second one. We will go from 0 to 100%, but the rate we want to go from, let's say 0.3 hertz, 0.3 to, let's say 3 hertz maximum. And okay, that's better. Let's call it wow rate, and let's call this one wow depth. Okay, we have this mapped. We can hide these two, we can hide everything. Let's play a chord. Faster rate and the tiny depth. Okay, cool. Now let's create a flutter effect. It will be very similar. Let's use a shifter to do that. And it's again in audio effects, so we can just find it. Let's press Control, Command F, Shifter. There it is. And this time we will be actually using an LFO. And with this LFO, we'll be mapping the same knob called fine tuning, but we will go very delicate in depth. We'll add a little bit of the jitter as well, but the rate will be actually much faster. So let's decide how much of the depth we want. We will go from 0 for sure, and we will go probably no more than 35%. That would be a lot. And the rates, we want this to be like a little bit faster, so from 2 Hz to 10 Hz. Okay, perfect. So let's map these two. Very simple. Let's group them together. And then we need 2 macros again. And this first macro will be, again, the rate. And the depth will be the second one. And now let's create the range of the macros that we need. So from 0 to, let's say, 35%, as we mentioned, and the rate from, let's say, 1.5 Hertz to 12 Hertz maximum. Okay, that's it done. Let's rename them. So flutter, rate, and flutter depth. Okay, that's perfect. And let's hide everything. We will just have these 2 macros. Now we have 2 effects. We have the flutter. And we have the wow effect. Of course, we want it to be delicate, just to have this feeling. Now we don't need a tuner anymore. And last thing, we will add 2 effects. First will be saturation, saturator, and then the second will be EQ3. Very underestimated, but very useful, especially in this case. So what we're going to do, we'll just group them together first. Will be easier to work with macros. So Command G or Control G again. We will only use 2 macros again. First one will be called vintage. And in this macro, we will map 2 knobs. So low gain and high gain. And we will set the range from 0 decibel to minus 10 decibel. Minus 10. Okay. And let's listen to what it does now, just to the sound. Let's play a chord. We go vintage from 0. So 0 vintage to the maximum vintage. Works as a charm. No other tweaks needed. Perfect. Now about saturation, let's just map 2 knobs together. So drive and output. So the problem with this is if we add a drive only, we will just create the sound which is distorted, overdriven, but also very loud. So we want to compensate it with the output knob, just going the other direction. So if we're going to be adding the drive, let's start from 0 to, let's say, 15 decibel. The output will go from 0 to, let's say, minus 12 decibel. Let's call this one drive. Okay, and let's test it out. So let's turn off the vintage. Let's test only the drive knob. So we're going from 0. Okay, cool. Maybe very delicate. So let's change the sign to a different one. Okay. Okay, so that's our effect basically done. What we need to do is just to group these together. So let's turn them on and group them together, and we will be using macros to control them all. So let's use 6 macros. That should be enough. And let's map the macros. So wow rate to this one, depth to this one, flutter rate here, flutter depth, and vintage to this one, and drive to the last one. Now we can just do some color coding. So let's say the wow effect will be a little blue, flutter will be yellow, vintage will be brown, and then drive will be red. Obviously, drive has to be red. So now let's hide all these, just leave all the macros, and let's rename this into Taper 66. Why not? Now let's test it out. Let's go from depth 0, 0, drive 0, vintage 0. So that's our couple chords. That's a clean sound. And let's add the wow depth. Okay, cool. Let's add the flutter. Let's add a little vintage. More vintage. Okay, so let's test it out on a different instrument. So let's add a piano. Let's just copy the effect. Let's use Add and Drag or Option and Drag on this track. And now it's copied over to this track again. Now we're getting this tape feeling. Also, of course, you'll be able to download this preset for free from my website. Just follow the link in the description box down below. No subscription or sign up needed. Just simply go and download it. But now, if you already created it with me, don't forget to save it. So press this diskette icon. It's going to save the preset. And you can also utilize this collection just to be able to find it. What I have here is my presets. You can just right click and use one called my presets or whatever you feel like your favorites or something like that. So then you will be always able to find it. Now, what else? What else can I find actually in my presets? Let's have a little look. What I've actually noticed straight away is the radioactive fallout alpha. Let's try this one on this wavetable synth. How does it sound? That's super cool. That's actually super cool. And if you want to know how to create this effect, watch this video next. Now, thanks so much for watching and see you guys next video. Cheers.